Good morning, subscribers, and here we are once again back on this familiar topic of externalities. And today I'm going to be looking at the corrective policy for a positive consumption externality. So you'll know, if you've watched my previous videos on this particular topic, when we're talking about a positive consumption externality, we mean one for which individuals, they underestimate the benefits to society. So in other words, the social benefits. And therefore their marginal private benefits are much lower than the marginal social benefits. And as a consequence of that, left to their own devices, private individuals would consume Q1 units of this particular good or service. And of course, in this instance, we're usually talking about things such as health and education. And they would consume Q1 at a price of P1 with an equilibrium point of A. Now, were they fully aware of the social benefits, then of course the consumption would be equivalent to a level of output or quantity here at Q2, because this is the point here at point B where the marginal social cost is equal to the marginal social benefit. So the question therefore is, what can the government do in order to encourage the private individual to consume Q2 of education or Q2 of health, whilst maybe at the same time still encouraging the consumer to only consider their private benefit, sort of fooling them into only considering themselves, but actually they consume the correct amount of the good or service. And of course, I'm sure you're immediately onto this one, ladies and gentlemen. You'll be thinking, what the government needs to do in this instance is that they need to provide a subsidy. And of course, you're absolutely right. Now, what does a subsidy do to costs of production? Well, of course, a subsidy lowers a firm's cost of production, enabling it to increase output or supply. And let's not forget, ladies and gentlemen, that our MSC curve is, of course, our supply curve, and these benefit curves are, of course, our demand curves. So if the costs of production are lowered by a subsidy, then the subsidy will shift the MSC curve to the right, and we want to be highlighting an intersection here, new equilibrium point there at point C, whereby we've got MSC has now shifted downwards to MSC2, for instance. We're at equilibrium point C here, where we're just considering the private benefits still, but what's crucial here, ladies and gentlemen, is that the provision of this per unit subsidy of BC, that vertical distance there you'll know is the subsidy, that encourages the private individual to actually consume Q2 units, which is what we wanted in the first place. And hence a subsidy can often be used to correct these positive consumption externalities. Now, just to take this one step further, ladies and gentlemen, because when we get to our valuation, this is important. If we are consuming 0 to Q2 units, like so, and each of those units is receiving a subsidy equivalent to BC, so that's the distance from there to there, so let's take this across here so we get P3. Then obviously, ladies and gentlemen, the cost to the government here, the cost to the government of providing this subsidy is the number of units times the per unit subsidy, which is the vertical distance there between P2 and P3, or the vertical distance BC. And so that entire rectangle, ladies and gentlemen, is the cost to the government of that subsidy. So a policy like this, ladies and gentlemen, the point is, of course, that a policy like this is not without cost. So let's now consider the evaluative points. So, number one, there's an opportunity cost. How are subsidies funded? Via taxation. So you're taking money from somebody and then you're dishing it out to somebody else, education in this instance. Well, if you take the money in tax and you dole it out to the education system, you can't give it to health, you can't give it to transport, you can't give it to defence. Now, when the Chancellor, Philip Hammond, stands up in a week's time, is it? On the 22nd of November to deliver the budget, these are some of the problems which he is facing. He wants to give money out, taxpayer funded, but there's only a finite amount of resource, and this comes back, ladies and gentlemen, to the basic fundamental problem of scarcity and choice. There's only a certain amount of money, can only be delivered in certain areas. So there's an opportunity cost element here. Secondly, sustainability. If you want to keep giving money to people, there is a certain sustainability issue there, because you can't keep asking the taxpayer for more and more and more money. And at a point in time, as you and Stuart said at a most recent conference that we attended, there is a tipping point. Now, where that tipping point is, who knows? And those of you who've, if you've had a little look at the Laffer curve, you will know that after a certain point, even though you continue to raise the rates of tax, the tax revenue actually drops out due to the disincentive effects that high levels of taxation yield for an economy. So that's very important also. Perhaps, ladies and gentlemen, how controversial of me, perhaps it's time that we all start making a financial contribution to our education, and that's something that I'm going to be considering with my own Year 12 students this week, today and tomorrow. Thirdly, the size of the subsidy. Now, we talked about this when we looked at the negative production externality. How does the government know what is the correct level? So if they over-egg the pudding, for example, and the subsidy is very, very large, then you'll end up way down here, so you've gone beyond Q2. But similarly, if they underestimate it, they will not be close enough to Q2. So again, estimating that the size of that subsidy, that's very, very difficult, but very crucial as well. And then finally, as a fourth sort of evaluative point here, companies, organisations which benefit from subsidies often suffer from what is known as organisational slack. In other words, they are shielded from competition, and as a consequence of that, shielding from competition, they are not as efficient as they otherwise might be. Indeed, we call that X-inefficiency, and so they're X-inefficient, and a subsidy, once then removed, the said company or organisation which was subsidised is not able to compete due to the competitive pressures which it is then exposed to. So these are all sorts of things, ladies and gentlemen, which you've got to think about when we're thinking about a subsidy. It's not just as straightforward as introduce a subsidy, there we have the solution. There are all sorts of problems surrounding introducing a subsidy. But ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to leave it at that for today. Thanks for your comments lately. It's been very interesting, and I look forward to many more in the future. Bye for now.